What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing us another video. Today I'm bringing us a video on Kamen Rider GO episodes 12 through 14. Yes, I know it's been a while since we've actually done reviews for this show, as well as, on the current Super Sentai, which is Lupin Ranger versus Power Ranger. I know it's been a while, but I'm finally back. I can finally, get caught up and actually start releasing them in a timely order. I originally said I was going to be able to do that last time. This time I really think it's going to happen. It's just I was very, very busy these past couple of weeks, so I haven't been able to at all, but I'm now able to. So I want to discuss these few episodes. I'm not going to go through them in extremely thorough detail necessarily, because if I go through them, it's going to take over an hour to just review every single one of them. So I'm going to sum things up and basically highlight major points from each of these episodes. So episode 12 was called My X, My Stage 2013, which is a reference, I believe, to Kamen Rider Gaiam's theme song, I believe. I'm trying to actually remember what what it's supposed to be a reference to, because all episode titles have to, they're always referencing some idea or concept. Yeah, right. It's that's right. It was Koda's catchphrase. Blech, I can't speak. Koda, if you're wondering who he is, Koda is, Kamen Rider Gaiam himself. So that's his phrase. I knew I recognized it when I even said it, but I forgot what it was from. It's been a while since I've actually seen Kamen Rider Gaiam, and Gaiam is a really good season. If you've never watched Gaiam before, it's totally one of those seasons that's really fun to watch. It's really interesting, and it's a very popular season in general. It's definitely not one of the most popular seasons, but it definitely has its audience, so I'll say that much right there. This episode overall, what it did in it is it featured Koda finally. It also had Kaito again, which Kaito was in the previous episode, and he was teased in the previous episode as well, but we finally got to see him. Now, we also got to figure out why there were two Kamen Rider GOs. The reason why, and we actually learned this very early on in the episode, is because the second one, the one that seemed to know everything, was from 3 days in the future, meaning that he already had experienced most of the things that the present day one had already experienced, and that's why he knew everything. He wasn't an evil version, he wasn't a bad guy, he was just one from the future, and that's because he was doing things that were going against how the timeline was supposed to work. And again, there were things that he was doing when he started off that were that way, but the thing is that he's really pushing things with the timeline, and this is what ends up happening in each of these three episodes. Really, this episode and actually episode 14 as well. So yeah, so episode 12 does that. We get to see him having to deal with, another rider, Gaiam, several times. We also get to see Kaito and, we get to see Kaito's exchanges with Gaze a bunch of times as well, which, Kaito doesn't really consider Gaze to be someone that is really will be able to alter fate, because things are set in a certain motion and he feels that he's not going to show his true strength. And that's one thing that's very important to this episode, where he actually does end up doing it, because he finds a way to get back from Helheim back to, the normal world. Now, what does end up happening is that in order for that to happen is that they have to get into the situation where they fight another Gaiam, and we also have it where the melon arms the melon arm ride watch is given to him by Koda, and Koda actually gives him also the he gives him the Gaiam ride watch as well. The reason why they even know of where he is also because of the future version of himself, which he gives him that much information. Though Woz is not very pleased with this idea, he's not very in support, and this actually is one of the major things that actually leads to him changing sides. In fact, Woz decides to switch to the side of the Time Jackers in these episodes. Now, he's not a bad guy altogether, but he's one that's starting to do things working alongside them. He's not an enemy per se. He's just doing things to his liking where it's going to benefit him in the end. Because again, he's this retainer that's trying to make sure that the future is works to his benefit, and so that he sees the Omojio that he wants to see, his lord, his overlord, or whatever. So that's very important. What we do end up seeing in this episode as well is that he ends up fighting against him in the past, but that happens after he manages to get the Gaiam ride watch. And also what actually happens is that even though he gets the ride watch, at one point Schwartz actually shows up, and so does Woes, and they end up taking the ride watch and sending it into Helheim. But what happens is that the Melon Arms actually travels there to bring it to Gaze, so that Gaze can have it and give it to Sugo, and this would be the way for them to link back together. Because again, he believes in him and he wants Gaze to be part of his story and everything, even though based on the history books, it sounds like he apparently did nothing for Geo. But as we have been seeing through this show, all those things that may have been written down in these history books are being altered. So theoretically, even though something may be written one way, based on how this show works, it will likely change just because of how things are structured for the show. So we see that a bunch. Eventually, he does finally get to do the final battle with another rider, Gaiam, which is cool. And that happens as well. What happens is that Gaze manages to use the ride bike to actually go back to the real world and travel over a major gap and destroy this void in Helheim, which allows him to travel through. And when he does that, what happens is that he gives him the ride watch that allows him to use the Gaiam armor, and at the same time the present, the one from 2015, which is the future Geo or Sugo, ends up fighting the past another rider, while the present day one ends up fighting the 2018 one. So those two things happen, and then the story is good. They have the Gaiam armor, so things are in good shape. Also, the person that was the another rider, Gaiam, loses his position in the Team Baron, so that's important as well. Then what we end up seeing is in episode 13. Now, episode 13 is cool because it actually is going to focus on Kamen Rider Ghost. Yes, so even though we know that, Gaze has the Ghost ride watch, it's never explained as to how he got it, as we know. And this is kind of cool because we get to see some interesting things happen. Not only is this about Ghost, but this is also focused on Decade. Yes, so this actually is pretty interesting because this tribute kind of works to both of them, even though really I guess it makes sense because Decade doesn't need to have a specific year, even though I'm sure they may do something at some point, although I'm not sure, maybe they won't. Again, we don't know if that's 100% clear, but from the fact that he manages to get the Decade ride watch in the second one of these episodes, on top of Gaze already having the Ghost ride watch, it does imply that most likely there won't be a dedicated episode aside from this one for Decade. So that's interesting. But I do like the fact that we're getting Decade at all. We do see that the another rider Ghost is super cool looking. I want to say that right now. I think it's actually one of the best designs for another rider. But there have been some really good ones. I mean, I like Gaiam a lot. But what we do end up seeing is that in episode 13, which is called Ghost Hunter 2018, is that we end up seeing Takaru, who was Kamen Rider Ghost, who's working with this lab group that's trying to investigate different, supernatural events happening or any cases of that sort, which is very fitting with what Kamen Rider Ghost kind of worked towards, because they had to deal with different incidents of that nature in certain ways. So that was kind of cool. What we do end up seeing as well in this episode is that they end up figuring out who it is. That's the other rider Ghost. They also end up talking about this other rider that's working alongside the Another Rider Ghost, which when they see it, they actually see Kamen Rider Agato, which is weird because Agato, obviously, like, why is he there? But they don't really understand the whole rider systems thing, and they didn't really look too closely at, what's he wearing, because he's wearing this belt. This belt is the Kamen Rider belt that is not the one for Agato, but it is the Decade belt. So that gives you the hint right away that this is obviously Decade. What's also noteworthy about the belt is the fact that the belt is the Neo Hesai, is the Neo, Decade driver. Reason why that's important is because the Neo Decade driver is one that actually features the rider symbols for Kamen Rider Kuga all the way up to Kamen Rider Build. It doesn't have Geo because it wouldn't make much sense for him to have Geo yet. Of course, that may change, say, in a future iteration when, Geo isn't the current rider. But again, it makes a lot of sense right now for him to have everyone up to Build. So anyway, what does end up happening is that in this episode, we end up seeing that they try to investigate things, trying to determine who the Another Rider is. There's this girl that's trying to find her brother, and supposedly her brother's linked to this Another Rider. And the thing is that eventually when Geo and Gaze end up fighting this Another Rider, they first of all get to use actually two really cool forms, which we get to see Gaiam, and I think it was like Gaiam and Wizard, which was really cool to see those combinations. And we also get to see one or two other forms used as well by them. So all those things are really, really awesome. I love the fact that we get to see all these different forms in this episode, because really they're already building up a pretty substantial amount of ride watches now, where a good amount of them are available to them. Again, there's still a bunch that are not yet. I mean, I'm still waiting for them to finally get some of the, ride watches prior to Decade, but we're getting there. And again, we don't know for sure exactly as to what they're going to be. I mean, we don't know what the next tribute season they're going to. We know that they're not going to be going for the next episode, for episode 15, to a specific season. They're actually going to 2068. That's pretty important. So that means that they're actually going to be fighting Oma Geo finally. This will be their first encounter with him, obviously, which will be very important to finally see. And I'm just looking forward to that a lot, just because it should be very cool. Now, as far as things go overall in episode 13, it continues on. We do learn about how if this person, which is revealed to be Mika, this girl that is looking for her brother, it's her, it is her brother, the Other Rider Ghost. And the thing is that he's dead because he tried saving her from a steel beam that actually fell on him and killed him. And the thing was that Wool tried to offer him the chance to be saved by him, which he's an evil force. And the thing was the guy didn't accept it, so he got killed instead. So then what that led to was him gaining this power. And so what we do end up seeing is that also with this rider, he tries to punish those people that commit accidents, whether it be a major injury or just something small. He's looking to get rid of those people and take their souls, which is very significant, and it's actually a pretty interesting idea overall. We do see several times that Takeru and Takeru and Sugo get along pretty well, which is great. I actually like that a lot, and they have a lot of interaction compared to Koda. Koda really didn't have too much, but he had enough where it was just perfect, because he had the dropping of the oranges in episode 12, which was really great because that references what rider he is, and just in general just the exchange that they see when Koda actually watches Sugo go up against the other rider Gaiam. It just is really cool. I like it a lot, and I think they did a really good job with all of that. So what we do also end up seeing is that in episode 13, he does end up losing his soul gets separated from his body. So that's something to note as well. And in episode 14, things continue with this, where we end up seeing that he ends up having to get back his body. We do see two rider forms made present by Kamen Rider Decade, because Kamen Rider Decade uses Agato again later in episode 13. I forgot to mention this. He uses Agato, and he also uses Hibiki. Agato is pretty cool because we get to see the final attacks for him, and we also get to see the final attack for Hibiki. For him, it's like he gains extra like pincer parts for his horns, since Agato has horns, and for Hibiki, he manages to summon this like kind of drum bell that goes against Geo, and then he's able to use his like his special trademark drumsticks for Hibiki and like bang them against against the gong, and what that does is that it leads to an electric shock that ends up hurting Geo. So it's really cool to watch all of that. Episode 14, though, we get to see continuation with all this, where it's clear that I forgot to mention this point, and again, I'm going all over just because it's a lot of episodes, and I'd rather kind of take a little bit from each place and kind of put certain elements into it. What we do also end up seeing is that, and this might be obvious from the fact that he's fighting against Geo, is that he's working alongside the Time Jackers. And that's because he wants to destroy the world. We know that he's the destroyer of worlds. That's what Decade is known for being, Tsukasa. So that's important to note. But it's really cool overall. I really was glad to see that he's in this, and we don't get to see him in person until episode 14, which by the way is called Go 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 Ghost 2015, which makes a lot of sense because that was something that they would always say. I believe it was either the theme said it or something like that. It's been a little while as well, but really cool. I totally remember that though. And anyway, in this episode, we do get to see more images of him. More scenes with Tsukasa, which is great. He works alongside them, and the thing is that the reason why they even find out about him is because of Woes, I believe. Woes is the one that actually leads them to this destroyer, because he mentions in episode 13 that I have this destroyer that I think you might be interested in, because he's now working alongside them, and somehow he has this connection to Tsukasa, which is just interesting, So I actually really appreciate that. I think it's a really great idea overall. What we do end up seeing as well in this episode is that there's continued fighting against Kamen Rider and other ghosts. We also get to see this really, really cool battle where they travel to, I think it was the year 2015, I believe so, where what happens is that Gaze ends up using the Another Rider ghost form, and what also ends up happening is that we see, sorry, not the Another Rider ghost, the Kamen Rider Gaze with ghost armor form, but we also get to see he also gets to use the he uses that while he fights another rider ghost, and then what happens is that Decade shows up. Hold on one second. And then Decade shows up, but he's using Ryoki, and then he switches to Kamen Rider Ghost. So you basically have it where there's Gaze with ghost armor, Another Rider Ghost, and Decade as Ghost. I mean, that's crazy. 3 ghosts at once going up against each other, and we get to see a finishing attack with Another Rider Ghost and the Decade with ghost form, which is so cool to see that going up against Gaze. I mean, I like these moments. They're really cool overall. I think these episodes are interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing where things will go with Tsukasa in general. We also get to see in this episode, I'm just trying to remember things here, we do get to see Geo use the ghost armor, which is the first time we get to see him use it. Normally it's always been Gaze. We also, I forgot to mention this in episode 13, we learned that the reason why he has the ghost armor is because he actually stole it from Omogeo in the first place. That's why he had it, and more likely than not, that might be the same reason why he has the drive armor when he started the show as well. He probably stole both of those ride watches when he first decided to, go against Omagio, which is interesting, So we get to see all that. We do also get to see that, after the battle with Gaze and the other rider Ghost, and also Decade with the Ghost form, he gives him the Decade Ride Watch, which what happens is that eventually Sugo gets that. And the thing is that we end up seeing as well that there's this fight that occurs with what do you call it? What happens is that since he's supposed to not be alive, what happens is that for some reason at first, Takaru can still see, Sugo. So what happens is they actually go back to the year 2015, and even though he's not alive, he's still to travel back in time with him. And what happens is that with his own abilities, he's able to actually save Mika's brother. And what happens is that changes history, where suddenly Takaru regains his memory and actually gains back his ghost driver. And then we also get to see Makoto, which is really cool, which Makoto is Kamen Rider Spectre from Kamen Rider Ghost, and the two of them get to fight against some basic enemies. But what happens is that at one point, what also ends up happening is that Sugo goes back into his body because things are normal, but Schwartz changes things again, and he makes it where Wool goes over to Mika's brother and gives him and puts the Ghost Ride Watch into him, which turns him back into another rider, Ghost. And what happens is that then he's separated again and he goes back to that time. And also Makoto and Takaru, are now, they lose their memories of what they just did and also being riders. What happens is that Makoto ends up helping Mika, and Takaru and Sugo go back to figure out things. And what happens is that eventually they end up having to fight, another rider Ghost again. When they do this time, we do get to see him use the Decade Ride Watch, which the Decade Ride Watch is one of the more special ride watches. It's also supposedly going to be the mid-season ride watch, which we see it actually in use, and that's important to note. But it's still really cool to see all that. As far as things go, though, we get to see him use this form with the Decade Ride Watch to take the form of Kamen Rider Geo Decade armor. And the thing is that with that form, we get to see him use two forms with it. Which two forms do we get to see? Well, we get to see the final form for Build, which isn't really the actual final form. They actually use Kamen Rider's Build Rabbit Tank Sparkling, which is kind of bizarre that they're using Sparkling instead of the real final form. I guess they just felt that was necessary for some reason. And then the other form we get to see is the Kamen Rider Ghost final form, which is correct, and that is supposed to be referencing the Grateful Damashi form, which is also like not technically the final form, but like the second form that's like right before the final form. It's kind of weird. It's like both of them decided to do it where it's like the forms that's right before the actual final form. I don't really understand why that is. And as far as things go, we do know that like X8 is supposed to be showing up relatively soon, and that's another example of one where it's not the actual final form. It's like the double action forms, which is just kind of weird to me as to why the double action forms are also having that happen to them. Like, I don't understand why they decided to do it, but I'm not going to complain either way. We do get to see these forms go up against the Another Rider Ghost, and they do manage to defeat Another Rider Ghost using the Grateful Damashi final form for Kamen Rider Ghost with the for Geo. Now, as far as whether or not Gaze will be able to access the Decade driver, I'm hoping so. Not the Decade driver, the Decade ride watch. I'm hoping so. I mean, again, it would be great if he could use it as well. It could also be the fact that maybe, and I think in a way that they probably will have to double this, because I just think they're going to do something like that for that kind of ride watch. You would imagine they might do something like that so that like Gaze can use it at the same time and they can really make the best use out of things. But again, we'll have to wait and see. They may have specific forms that only Sugo will use, and certain forms that only Gaze will use for that as well. But we'll have to see what happens. As far as things go, otherwise, we do see after all this is done, things are good in that time. They say goodbye to Takaru, and then what happens is that when they head back to the home, they end up seeing that Tsukasa is there, and he apparently ate Sugo's dinner. And what happens is that when he goes to leave, Sugo asks like why, apparently his uncle tells him that Tsukasa was there to speak to him. And the thing is that he asks like, why were you here? And Tsukasa tells Sugo that he's trying to tell him that, I won't let you become, you won't become king because I'm going to destroy this world. And that's kind of how the episode pretty much ends. Just in general, I'm liking these episodes. Again, there's a lot going on. I know I'm kind of going back and forth with a bunch of these episodes, and I'm hoping for the next episode to actually, be in time where I'm not having to jump all around. Again, it's a little harder with 3 episodes having to catch up, and unfortunately, it's just a matter of, I just didn't have the time to do these past 3 episodes, so I'm just trying to do it in one big video. But overall, I'm liking the show. I'm looking forward to seeing where they'll go after the 2068 next episode. As far as what season they'll travel to. Again, it's complete mystery to me. I do know that they're going to have an episode this week and next week, but then the following week there won't be any episode because of holidays, because I know that they're taking off for that weekend. So just keep that in mind, that this weekend there will be an episode. So 15 and 16 will happen in December, but 17 won't happen till January. So just keep that in the back of your head. Anyway, that's about it for me. So I'd love to know your guys' opinion about this. Did you guys like these episodes? Which episode did you like the most? Personally, for me, I would say probably episode 14. I think that one was really good just because we got to see all these different forms. We also got to see one other thing that I forgot to mention, which is that we get to see Gaze and Sugo use the Taimajins going up against Wool and Aura. And they actually get to use it and have the Cross Z and build ride watches as like the face part of the Taimajins, which is really cool to see both of those together. So I like that as well. Overall, they did a lot in this episode, and I'm just very excited to see where things will go, and I'm really interested in seeing, will Tsukasa continue to pursue Sugo? It does seem like that's the case, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that will work. And just in general, will Tsukasa eventually work alongside Sugo, or will he be against him the whole time? I want to know how that's going to work, because they have similar ideas, and yet they're also against each other, because they're both like time travelers, but in different ways. So we'll have to wait and see. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next videos. Until then, guys, I am Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.